Hello, my name is Pierre Dupuis, and I've been lucky enough to grow up in the McNally house, which is behind us here in Altadena, California. My folks purchased this house back in 1955. At the time, it was condemned to be torn down. They were going to put 3 tract homes in this space. But fortunately, my folks got an offer in on it. It fell out of escrow. It was already in escrow. And they purchased the house and they worked on it for the next 64 or 5 years. Mr. McNally was one of the biggest promoters of Altadena that ever lived here. He came here in 1880 from Chicago. He had been born in Northern Ireland. He had worked as an apprentice in a print shop growing up, emigrated to the United States and worked in New York City and eventually in Chicago, and was working at the Tribune when he met a gentleman named Rand, and he and Mr. Rand put together a company which you're probably familiar with the name, the Rand McNally Publishing Company, and they became a very large publishing entity in Chicago. Both of them were millionaires. So he decided to come out to California in about 1880, and so they took a rather arduous trip via, railroad out to San Francisco and then took a steamer down to San Pedro. They ended up in Pasadena. When he arrived in Southern California, he was just amazed by all the things that would grow here and bloom here. He was a big horticulture fan. And so when he arrived here, he saw the slope of Altadena and what could possibly be done up here on the slope with water and such and good land. And he bought 15 acres from the Woodburys and proceeded to build one of the most magnificent homes in Altadena. It lies just on the east side of Santa Rosa, and it basically goes from Mariposa Street, and it went down to about Berry Street in this day and age. It was 15 acres. And before they even broke ground on the house, they brought in water and he began planting the most lavish gardens anybody had ever seen. So immediately water came here, they started planting. Shortly thereafter, he hired Fred Rohrig, a young and prominent architect in Pasadena, who designed the house behind us here for him. At the time, he paid Mr. Rohrig $15,000 just for the design aspects of the house. And back in the 1880s, $15,000, you could custom build a house and landscape it for that amount of money. So you can see where no expense was spared on this house. It was really a showplace for Altadena. So he brings in Rohrig. Rohrig designs this beautiful home behind us. At the same time, McNally buys property across the street from here, where the Altadena Library now sits, for his good buddy and business friend, Colonel G.G. Green, who was a patent medicine man and also a Chicago resident who was a friend of Mr. McNally. And they proceeded to build the house across the street. He hired Fred Rohrig, the same architect, to design his home. And the two gentlemen actually shared a gardener because they had a lot of property here. And the gardener was also responsible for making the gas that fired their gas lights in the house. When Andrew McNally came to Altadena in about 1880 and first saw this part of California, he really fell in love with it and thought it'd be a great place to build a home, so he went about doing so. When he arrived here, the Woodburys had already established a home here in Altadena, and the deodar trees that now line Santa Rosa Street had been planted by Fred Woodbury some years earlier and transplanted all along what was to be the driveway for the Woodbury Mansion. As it turned out, the Woodbury Mansion never got built at the top of Santa Rosa, but it did provide a really nice sort of an entrance or almost a driveway to the McNally residence and the Green residence across the street. So it was sort of already a pre-installed, really a nice way to usher you into these two properties. And of course, all these properties face to the south. They enjoy the nice view out to the ocean. Among the early residents here in Altadena, especially right here at this intersection of Mariposa and Santa Rosa Streets, you had Mr. McNally, who first built a house here, his good friend Colonel G.G. Green across the street. But then across the street to the north, you had both the Garts and the Armstrong families, who both were friends of McNally as well. McNally had 4 children. His daughter was friends with one of their families, and so they ended up building homes right across the street from here. It just led to this whole little community sort of springing forth from the intersection of these trees and Mariposa Street right here. So it's led to a really amazing future.